Welcome back. Activist groups and Democrats have been able to largely neutralize efforts to disenfranchise, those are the allegations anyway, millions of voters across the country with new laws at the polls. In fact, in Pennsylvania, a judge decided not to rule today on whether to block all or part of that state's new voter ID law. The judge is now facing an early October deadline for a ruling. Let's bring in Perry Bacon, MSNBC contributor and political editor of the Griot. Perry, let me point out, first of all, the activists have said or pointed out they believe that this would disenfranchise millions of voters. We know the other side of the argument is that they want to prevent voter fraud. The bottom line in your report, though, is some of these concerns sparked activist groups to take action, and they may have put the kibosh, for lack of a better word, on some of the voter ID laws that they were concerned about, or certainly have them amended.
Exactly, Tamara. And you've seen over the last year Republicans pass a lot of voter laws that were designed to change the voting laws in ways Democrats thought were discriminatory. Democratic groups, liberal groups, NAACP in a lot of states went to court to dispute these laws. And in Texas, in Ohio, in Florida, in Wisconsin, the liberal groups have won, and they've got a lot of voter ID laws and other laws struck down in court. So these laws in a lot of places won't actually go into effect and won't be enforced. And Pennsylvania looks like it might do the same thing next week based on what we're seeing so far.
But there's some interesting polling out there, Perry. For example, Washington Post asked the question, should voter ID required at the polls? 74% said yes, 23% said no. That was conducted July 7th through the 19th. And there were a couple of other polls, even out of Pennsylvania, that showed people in that state supported voter ID laws. So how do you jive all of that or gel that with what you're hearing from these activists to what people are saying in the polling?
It's been surprising, even while these polls, Democrats support these voting ID laws. I think the general idea is that people, it seems illogical when you're asked in a poll, should someone have an ID to vote? And the answer is yes. In the same way, should they have an ID to get on a plane, I think is the argument.
Sure.
But when you break down the numbers, what you see is African Americans and elderly people, both black and white, and other races as well, tend not to have driver's licenses in a lot of states. So you end up often finding the people who are having the hardest time being able to register to vote in Pennsylvania are 90 years old, and they voted a bunch of times, and now we've suddenly put up a roadblock. So that's what the groups are arguing, and that's why these laws have become so controversial.
And to your point, when people are asked the question of should it be required, should it not, they do go to the, for example, you need an ID to get on a plane. But what's not factored into that question, and Chris Matthews has done a great job at this, he had a guest on who described in great detail what the process was like in Pennsylvania, and for this one person it took around 4 hours to get an ID. And imagine if you're an 80-year-old or if you're a person working a couple of jobs and you've got to carve this out and you've never been required to do this before and you've always voted responsibly.
What the courts have generally found is essentially what you said is the Republicans argue there's a big voter fraud problem and therefore we need these laws. And with these courts, even some Republican judges have written in their opinions, they've said, look, we don't see a voter fraud problem that exists, and we certainly don't see one that exists in the way in which we should make 90-year-olds have to spend so much time getting new voting applications to vote. There's not a big enough a problem, the judges are saying, to justify these new laws, and therefore they're ruling against them. All
right, Perry Bacon with the Griot. Thank you, Perry, for your time. Good seeing you.
Thanks, Tamara.
And up next, today's News Nation Gut Check, another